Look, ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a county fair shooting gallery. This is the Trident Proving Ground. We've had active duty SEALs, men at the absolute peak of their careers, wash out of this simulation all morning. Maybe you should just watch from the observation deck. A ripple of condescending chuckles went through the gallery of hardened operators and defense contractors. They saw a woman in her late 40s, dressed in simple civilian attire, her hair tied back, without ceremony. She was unassuming, unremarkable, and in their world of sculpted warriors and tactical gear, she was invisible. But the woman, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired, Anya Sharma, said nothing. Her face, a mask of calm neutrality, didn't so much as twitch. Her hands, resting on the worn composite stock of the M210 enhanced sniper rifle, were perfectly, unnervingly still. She simply gave a slow, deliberate nod, an acknowledgement that she had heard the words but assigned them no weight. From his elevated command post, Admiral Hayes, the base commander and a man who had seen 3 decades of war, leaned forward, his binoculars trained not on the digital range, but on her. He didn't see a middle-aged veteran on a tour. He saw the subtle details others missed. The way her left foot was angled slightly forward to brace against recoil. The way her shoulders were perfectly squared to the range. The almost imperceptible cant of her head as she listened to the ambient air currents. It was a stance of sublime, predatory stillness, a posture of readiness he hadn't seen in 20 years, not since a dusty rooftop in a forgotten corner of the world. If you believe that true competence is measured in actions, not assumptions, type proven in the comments below. The antagonist, a civilian contractor named Vance whose confidence far outstripped his experience, took her silence as acquiescence to his superior judgment. He continued his loud pronouncements, ensuring the entire gallery could hear his magnanimous expertise. The Reaper's Gauntlet simulates 100 hostile targets, ma'am. 100. They appear across multiple vectors, under dynamic wind conditions calculated by the minute, some obscured, some moving at speed. It requires more than just a steady hand. It requires instinct, aggression, a killer's mindset that, frankly. He trailed off, gesturing vaguely in her direction, letting the insulting implication hang thick and heavy in the air. The onlookers shifted, their amusement curdling into a kind of uncomfortable pity. They were witnessing a public dressing down, a gatekeeper flexing his petty authority. Sharma, however, remained a statue of placid focus. She ignored him completely. Instead, she adjusted the bipod, the metallic click of the legs locking into place echoing with sharp finality in the tense silence. With a fluid, practiced motion, she pulled the bolt back and slid a single round into the chamber, the sound a definitive, mechanical punctuation to Vance's verbal assault. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at the crowd. Her world had narrowed to the circular frame of the scope, the precise lines of the reticle, and the shimmering digital landscape that stretched out into the simulated desert heat. Her movements were an economy of force, a ballet of practiced efficiency learned not in classrooms or firing ranges, but in blood-soaked places that don't appear on any map. The men in the room saw a quiet woman being tolerated. The Admiral saw a weapon preparing to be aimed, and he felt a cold thrill of anticipation. The silence she projected was not one of weakness, but of immense, coiled potential. It was the silence of the storm before the lightning strikes, the profound calm of a predator that has already marked its prey and is simply waiting for the perfect moment to begin the hunt. The massive screen above the range flickered to life, its cold digital light washing over the observation gallery. Bold, white letters appeared. Gauntlet initiated. Targets, 100. Time limit, 10 minutes. A sprawling, complex digital city materialized, a labyrinth of concrete and steel under a harsh, unforgiving sun. Then, they began to appear. Red silhouettes, the universal symbol for the enemy, popped up with ruthless speed. A sniper in a distant bell tower, a pair of guards on a rooftop, a driver in a fast-moving vehicle, a figure briefly visible through a dusty third-story window. The challenge was overwhelming by design, meant to test the absolute limits of a Tier 1 operator's situational awareness and speed. Anya Sharma took a single, slow, deliberate breath. Inhale through the nose, a long count of 4. Hold, letting the oxygen saturate her system. Exhale through the mouth, a slow, controlled release of tension and air. Her finger, which had been resting straight along the frame, curled almost imperceptibly, its tip coming to rest on the cold, curved steel of the trigger. She didn't tense. She settled. It was a process honed over 2 decades of clandestine warfare, a ritual of becoming one with the rifle, a sublime fusion of human will and mechanical precision that few soldiers in history ever truly achieve. The world outside the scope ceased to exist. The condescending laughter, the arrogant pronouncements of Mr. Vance, the weight of 100 skeptical eyes, all of it dissolved into an irrelevant, distant hum. There was only the mission, the cold and beautiful mathematics of the shot. The parallax knob turned with a whisper-quiet motion, bringing the distant world into crystalline focus. There was no past, no future. There was only this single, eternal second of perfect calm before the storm. The first shot was not a thunderous roar, but a quiet, surgical crack, a sound almost lost in the cavernous, air-conditioned space of the advanced range. On the screen, the red silhouette in the distant bell tower vanished. A single word appeared next to the target counter, eliminated. Then, before the faint echo had even died, another crack. The first rooftop guard disappeared. Crack. The second guard. It wasn't a volley, it was a rhythm. A calm, methodical, terrifyingly consistent rhythm. Crack. Target down. Breathe. Eject brass. Crack. Target down. Breathe. Eject brass. She was not merely shooting. She was conducting a symphony of precise, instantaneous violence. The target in the moving car, a shot that had stumped 3 active-duty SEALs, was dispatched with chilling foresight. She fired not at the silhouette, but at the point in space where it would be in 7 seconds, the 762mm round passing cleanly through both the front and rear passenger windows. The targets appearing in areas of high, variable wind. She held off by what seemed like an impossible margin, placing the crosshairs on empty air, yet the bullet drifted perfectly onto the mark, guided by an instinct that bordered on the supernatural. The timer on the screen was a blur. The target count plummeted with sickening speed, 87, 64, 45, 31, 12. The room, once filled with murmurs and quiet jokes, was now plunged into a deafening, reverent silence. The only sound was the metronomic cycle of the rifle, the sharp report, the metallic clink of the spent casing hitting the concrete floor, the soft, controlled whisper of her breath. With 2 seconds to spare on the clock, the final hostile silhouette vanished from a high window. The screen went black for a moment, then flashed with a final, stunning verdict. Gauntlet complete. Targets eliminated. 100/100. Time. 9:58. Vance's jaw was slack. His face, once flushed with condescending arrogance, was now a pale, sickly mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. That's not possible. He stammered to no one in particular, his voice a pathetic squeak in the tomb-like silence. Heavy, deliberate footsteps broke the spell. Admiral Hayes descended from the command post, his face carved from granite. He moved with the unhurried authority of a man who commanded fleets. He didn't look at the stunned crowd. He didn't spare a single glance for the humiliated Mr. Vance. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, were fixed solely on Anya Sharma. She was already in the process of clearing her weapon, her movements just as precise and unhurried as they had been before she began. She ejected the final, empty magazine, checked the chamber, and laid the rifle gently back on its stand, as if it were a sleeping child. Her work was done. The Admiral walked past her to a secure terminal on the wall, his expression grim and resolute. He swiped his high-level clearance card. The screen lit up, demanding credentials. "Bring up service record," he commanded the system, his voice low but carrying the unmistakable weight of 4 decades of command. "Sharma, Anya. Master Chief, Petty Officer. Service number 0415511212. The screen flickered for a moment, processing the request, and then displayed a personnel file so heavily redacted it was almost entirely black. But enough was visible. The Admiral leaned closer, his eyes scanning the lines of text that represented a life lived in the shadows, a career spent at the very tip of the spear. He stood up straight, turned to face the gallery, and began to speak. Each word he uttered was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation of every ignorant assumption that had filled the room only 10 minutes prior. He was not merely correcting a record, he was delivering a verdict. The Admiral's voice cut through the silence, each syllable a perfectly calibrated munition aimed at the heart of their prejudice. Unit assignment, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, he began, letting the formal name for SEAL Team 6 hang in the air. A wave of shock rippled through the operators. He wasn't finished. Call sign, Cali Active Deployments, 14, all in non-permissive environments. Combat Sniper Qualifications, Master Instructor, Tier 1 Classified Programs, Joint Special Operations Command. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the crowd before landing squarely on Vance. She didn't just pass sniper school. She designed the final evaluation test. The one half of you failed the first time. He turned back to the screen. Medals and commendations include Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart. He trailed off, his voice becoming quieter, more somber. Highest confirmed long-range kill count in DevGru history. She wasn't just a SEAL sniper. For 5 years, she was the SEAL sniper, the final option when a mission absolutely could not fail. He took a deep breath. The very simulation you're running, Mr. Vance, the Reaper's Gauntlet, is based on 3 of her after-action reports from a single week in the Kandahar province. He turned away from the screen. He faced Sharma, who had finished her work and now stood quietly, her hands clasped behind her back. The Admiral, a man who commanded more firepower than most nations, drew himself to his full, imposing height and rendered the sharpest, most formal salute of his career. Master Chief, he said, his voice thick with a respect that bordered on pure reverence. It is an honor to have you on my range. He then dropped his salute and turned his gaze, now as cold and hard as a block of ice, onto Vance. Assumptions are a luxury we can't afford in our line of work, contractor. You assumed weakness. You assumed inexperience. You forgot the first rule of the professional. The most dangerous person in the room is usually the one who doesn't need to tell you they are. The story of the retired Master Chief who single-handedly conquered the Reaper's Gauntlet didn't just spread. It detonated across the special operations community. It was whispered in hushed, reverent tones in chow halls from Coronado to Virginia Beach. It was texted between secure devices on firebases in Afghanistan and training camps in undisclosed locations. The video from the range security camera, mysteriously leaked from the Admiral's own terminal, became a viral legend, a piece of digital folklore passed between operators like a sacred text. It was a masterclass in professional humility. The narrative wasn't about a woman showing up a group of men. It was a far more profound lesson. It was a brutal, undeniable reminder that true competence wears no uniform, has no gender, and needs no introduction. It was the ultimate, irrefutable vindication of the quiet professional. The fallout for Vance was swift and decisive. He was quietly removed from his lucrative contract liaison position at the Trident Proving Ground. His career as a self-important gatekeeper was over. 3 weeks later, a simple, hand-addressed envelope arrived at the base's mailroom. It was addressed to Master Chief Sharma. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short, handwritten note from Vance. Stripped of all its former arrogance, the letter was a simple, profound apology. He wrote that he had spent his entire life judging books by their covers and had finally been handed one that completely rewrote his understanding of the world. He was taking a new job, he said, one where his primary duty would be to listen, not to talk. He had learned his lesson not in a classroom, but in the crucible of a 10-minute display of absolute perfection. Anya Sharma, for her part, deflected all of a sudden, intense attention with the same calm efficiency she applied to her shooting. When a young SEAL, barely out of BUD/S and his face a mask of pure awe, approached her to ask how she did it, she simply gestured to the M210 rifle resting on its stand. "The weapon is the instrument," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Discipline is the musician. Focus on your discipline, not on the applause." That single piece of advice was worth more to the young frogman than his entire year of training. She spent the rest of the week at the proving ground, not telling war stories or basking in her newfound fame, but mentoring the new generation of snipers. She moved among them silently, a quiet phantom on the range, offering small, precise corrections that made a world of difference. She adjusted a shooter's grip by a mere fraction of an inch, corrected another's breathing pattern, and spoke to a third about the mental calm required to make a shot under unimaginable pressure. She taught them that the most important distance to master wasn't the one to the target, but the one between their own two ears. Later, one of the range technicians recovered the brass casing from her 100th and final shot. It was polished and mounted on a simple block of dark walnut wood and hung above the main entrance to the advanced sniper school. There was no name on it, no date. There was only a simple inscription burned into the wood. Competence is quiet. Assumptions are loud. 100 out of 100 every operator who passed through those doors, for decades to come, would see it. A permanent, silent monument to the day a living legend reminded them all what true, unadorned professionalism looked like. The range itself was unofficially renamed by the operators who trained there. They simply called it the Sharma Line. 2 years later, the culture at the Trident Proving Ground had fundamentally and irrevocably shifted. The Sharma Line was no longer just a state-of-the-art facility. It was a place of reverence, a classroom where the most important lessons were not about ballistics, but about character. The story of what happened that day was now told to every new recruit, not as a sensational tale of spectacle, but as a foundational lesson in the operational ethos of naval special warfare. It was the first story they heard, a parable about the poison of prejudice and the silent, overwhelming power of demonstrated excellence. The casual arrogance that had once permeated the contractor class and even some of the younger operators was gone, replaced by a cautious, professional respect. Instructors no longer looked for the loudest voice in the room or the most physically imposing physique. They had been taught to look for the quietest hands, the steadiest eyes, the calmest heart. They looked for the markers of a true professional, the subtle tells that Anya Sharma had displayed. They looked for the next Sharma. The legend of the operator known as Kali became a powerful teaching tool, a narrative used by team leaders and senior chiefs to illustrate the dangers of underestimation and the supreme virtue of humility. It taught a new generation of warriors that respect is not a birthright of rank or gender, but a currency earned through precision, discipline, and an unwavering, obsessive commitment to one's craft. The story proved, in a way no lecture ever could, that a warrior's legacy is not built on the medals they wear on their chest or the stories they tell in a bar, but on the standards they inspire in those who come after them. Anya's 100 perfect shots had created a ripple effect that was still expanding, strengthening the very core of the community she had served for so long. True strength is never loud. It does not need to announce its presence or demand respect. It is the silent, unyielding mountain that weathers the fiercest storm, the deep, patient river that carves the hardest stone, the quiet professional whose actions speak with a thunderous clarity that drowns out 1,000 empty boasts. Anya Sharma didn't come to the range that day to prove a point to anyone but herself, to once again feel the familiar weight of the rifle in her hands, to revisit the sacred, silent calculus of wind, distance, and time. But in pursuing her own quiet standard of perfection, she inadvertently held up a mirror to an entire institution and forced it to look hard at its own reflection, to confront the subtle prejudices and arrogant assumptions that had crept into its culture. She reminded them that the ultimate weapon is not forged from steel or carbon fiber, but from a spirit of unwavering competence, a heart immune to the seductions of arrogance, and a profound silence that speaks volumes. Her true legacy was not the 100 digital targets she dropped in under 10 minutes. It was the thousands of corrosive assumptions she shattered with each and every perfectly placed shot. She left behind not just a record, but a standard of quiet, absolute, and undeniable excellence. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, and where professional discipline defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.